Hey everybody, TacticAngel here, back on the PlayStation 4, playing some War of the Warships Legends. Today I want to give you a little look at another premium ship. This time it's going to be the Tier 7 premium American cruiser, USS Wichita. With my reviews, I first like to go into the ship's history, then we'll talk about how she plays in the game, talk about the commander choices, stats, and finish off with some gameplay. If you want to skip around at all to any one of those sections, there should be some time codes down in the description. The Wichita was a unique ship, a class of 1. Originally, her spot in the US Navy's Treaty-era cruiser fleet was to be filled by a New Orleans-class heavy cruiser, but the Navy was not entirely happy with that design. Instead, the Navy decided that it would build their last heavy cruiser with the Brooklyn-class hull, but arm her with 8-inch guns. She would sport better armor than the New Orleans-class she might have otherwise ended up being, having a thicker main belt, better lines in the water, and storing her float plane at the rear quarterdeck, which was a much safer place for the entire ship in the event that the aviation fuel needed for such aircraft were to be set ablaze. The Wichita was laid down in October 1935, launched in November 1937, and commissioned into service in February 1939. She took her shakedown cruise in the Caribbean and would spend most of the next couple of years in and around the Central and South Atlantic. In 1940, Britain invaded Iceland, essentially to make any possible German invasion of Iceland that much more difficult. And in 1941, as part of Operation Indigo II, the US forces took their place in garrison in Iceland. This force would include 20,000 troops and personnel, including USS Wichita. So Iceland was where the Wichita was located when America officially entered the war, though she was quickly folded into the British home fleet and transferred to Scapa Flow. Operating from there, she participated in several convoy escorts, including the ill-fated PQ-17, which had been ordered to scatter upon news that the Tirpitz might be making a move to enter the Atlantic. Of course, the Tirpitz never did try to break through to the Atlantic, like Bismarck did, essentially because it had gone so poorly for the Bismarck the first time. Unfortunately, the transports of PQ-17 were then easy pickings for U-boats after the convoy had broken up. After some repairs to fix vibration while at speed, she participated in Operation Torch, which was the invasion of northern Africa. During the Battle of Casablanca against Vichy French forces, she helped silence the guns at El Hanc and kept the French surface vessels that might have been able to sortie against them from taking to sea. It was in this capacity that she brushed elbows with the Jean Bart, though this is probably a bit misleading since the French battleship was more aptly named the Jean Barge at the time because it wasn't going anywhere. It fired its guns only a total of 7 times before the USS Massachusetts knocked out her one operational turret. That said, the Wichita performed admirably, taking a hit from the shore battery, but aiding in sinking around 4 French destroyers and a French cruiser. In 1943, the Wichita went in for a lengthy refit. During this refit, her superstructure was reduced in size to offset the increasing number of anti-aircraft guns and other systems that had been mounted to the top of the ship, and, unless I am mistaken, this seems to be the version of the ship that we see in-game. In 1943 and onward then, the Wichita participated in operations in the Pacific, where she would see an extraordinary amount of action, even for a US cruiser. She was present at the Battle of Vernal Island, where the USS Chicago was sunk by an aerial torpedo. Wichita was also struck by a torpedo, but thankfully it failed to detonate. Later, in July of that year, she participated in the comedic Battle of the Pips, where the Wichita had picked up several unidentified signatures on radar. Wichita, as well as the battleships Mississippi and Idaho, opened fire, expending over 1,000 shells, only to find out later that they'd expended all this ordnance on a flock of migrating birds. Wichita continued her service through the Marshall Islands campaign, Saipan, and the Battle of the Philippine Seas. During the Battle of Leyte Gulf, she was part of Task Force 34, which ran down the carrier Chiyoda and helped to sink her, as well as some of her escorts. After this, Wichita had to sit out for a little while due to damage to her propellers, again. But she was back in the fight in time for the invasion of Okinawa, where she provided shore bombardment again. She was damaged in a friendly fire incident there, and though the damage was minor, this would be the last of the major operations in which Wichita took part. After the war, she was used like so many other ships in Operation Magic Carpet, bringing home the troops. She was decommissioned in 1947, though she'd performed admirably and actually won 13 battle stars. She was an older treaty-era cruiser, top-heavy, and less capable than the numerous and more advanced Baltimores that came after her. So unfortunately, she was struck from the Navy Register and scrapped in 1959. So when I saw that the Wichita was coming to World of Warships Legends, I think I said, okay, here's a ship that's obviously just going to be a premium Baltimore, and I can honestly say this is not. And while I think it would be hard to say that this is a better ship than the Baltimore, as it has some pretty remarkable weaknesses compared to the other Tier 7 American heavy cruiser, she also has a lot of fun advantages. Where the Baltimore is one of the cruisers that can really punish battleships, the most of any Tier 7 cruiser perhaps, the Wichita will struggle to do the same thing. Instead, she relies on a much higher rate of fire to pump out as much both armor-penetrating shots, but also a lot more high-explosive shells than you would typically fire in the Baltimore. To get the most out of your AP, you're going to have to consider your targets carefully, because the main belt of many battleships is going to actually defeat your shots. Except where desperate or well-positioned, you will often find yourself in HE spamming mode, which actually works out pretty well considering the Wichita's lofty firing arcs. You will also need to be careful with the Wichita because you aren't really that tough, at least not in the HP department. Having more HP than the 3 Tier 7 light cruisers that are in the game right now, and as far as I can tell probably the upcoming Cleveland as well, but less than all 6 of the Tier 7 heavy cruisers. That said, your bow is 27mm, like most of the Tier 7 cruisers, so with good angling you can bow tank 15-inch guns or smaller. Where the Wichita really excels though, and what I would replace tough on this screen with, is that she's phenomenally nimble, or agile. Though please don't think that she's actually fast. Her maneuverability added to the fast rate of fire to me makes this more of an ideal cruiser to take up the role of destroyer hunter. Since you have both hydro and radar, you have a lot of tools at your disposal for this, and actively dodging can go a long way to improving your mediocre survivability. If you want to play this a little bit more like the Baltimore, you do have some ability to do that, though without super heavy AP, you are going to have to be more selective with your targeting and make use of shell types in different ways than you would traditionally in the Balti. Though I would suggest playing the Wichita more as an inside cruiser. If you watch my channel, you know I'm a fairly aggressive player. And I will tell you, in full honesty, she does have the same range as the Baltimore, so she can accommodate both playstyles. The commander you choose for the Wichita is going to significantly change the role you'll probably end up playing. The go-to commander for 90% of everything in the American cruiser line is Norman Scott, so I'd imagine he'll probably be the first person a lot of people try in this ship. Scott offers the longest range, best penetration and damage with punching through, and the best accuracy, both because of his base trait and fixated. I think it's somewhat questionable how useful all these skills are on the Wichita because the ship seems to have pretty good accuracy on its own, and without super heavy AP, it does seem to struggle with penetrating thick battleship armor belts quite a bit more than the Baltimore, even with improved penetration. And if you're anything like me, firing at things that are 18 kilometers away is a pretty questionable use of your time. In any case, if you want your Wichita to function most like a Baltimore, he's going to be the captain for you. The other dedicated cruiser captain for Americans is Thomas Kincaid. I've never had much of a place in my heart for Kincaid, but with the Wichita, I've kind of done a complete 180. Part of this may be the current meta, with a lot of super sneaky destroyers out there, and a bunch of communist cruisers hell-bent on watching the world burn. But Kincaid comes with the best survivability in American cruisers, particularly against HE. Pick Ingenious and you'll end up with the best turret traverse that you can get on this ship, and you'll also probably be the fastest and most maneuverable version of the Wichita. Though you don't have the best concealment with Kincaid, you will find engaging destroyers at close and medium range more comfortable with this combination of skills. For better or worse though, Kincaid pretty much does nothing for the offensive capabilities of your ship. And while something of an offbeat choice, because no one likes to use base commanders for anything, Dewey does actually offer the Wichita a lot of advantages, including a bit more offensive potential in the range and HE fire chance over Kincaid, but less so than what Scott would offer. Most importantly though, he has the greatest stealth potential of any of these choices. Running double concealment, and look at me now, can drop your concealment to around 9.1 kilometers, which turns the whole concept of being outspotted by a destroyer on its head. Basically, if a destroyer can see you, then you can almost certainly radar him. I imagine this is going to be a very strong build for competitive play, so absent a destroyer, there's not really all that much that's going to outspot you, so you pretty much won't have to deal with any of those folks hugging the Jean Barriere. As we run down the stats, the values you see here are pretty close to stock values, but they are modified by the following equipment. And I'll be mostly comparing the Wichita to her Tier 7 American Tech Tree counterpart, the Baltimore, with similar choices. The Wichita weighs in with 37,900 hit points. This is more than 10% less than her Tech Tree counterpart. And right now, in terms of Tier 7 cruisers, she has less HP than any of the other heavy cruisers, though she has more HP than any of the light cruisers. Her armor is similar to the Baltimore, the most important thing being her 27mm bow, which can bounce 15-inch battleship shells, but which will get overmatched by any of the 16-inch guns or larger in the game, so beware of deletion here. With 3x3 203mm guns, you have the same number, arrangement, and gun caliber as the Baltimore. They have the same range as the Baltimores, and your turret speed is also the same on both ships. The Wichita has a better rate of fire though, more than 15% faster. This 8.8 second reload with the 34.5 second turret traverse being the result of the main battery reload mod in slot 4 that I have. The HE shells are the same on both ships, with a respectable 2800 damage and 14% fire chance, but the AP shells aren't the super heavy AP. They do 20% less damage, or exactly 1,000 less, and you will find that you suffer more shatters against well-armored battleships if you aim for the main belt with the Wichita than you get with the Baltimore. In all, the higher rate of fire encourages you to spend a lot more time with HE in this ship, though you can still punish cruisers that are making mistakes in front of you, so don't assume that I mean that you should put your ammo choice on cruise control. In terms of secondary battery, these ships both have very similar overall capabilities, with the difference being that the Wichita comes with 2 less secondary guns, but 2 of her secondary guns on each side fire twice as fast. Because 2 of the secondaries are also located on the center line, this does technically mean that you can get more guns on target should you ever find yourself in close quarters, but the open mounts on the side are probably going to get taken out a lot easier than turrets are going to be, so that advantage is probably not going to live very long in an actual combat, and let's be honest, you probably shouldn't be relying too much on your secondaries in this particular cruiser. When we come to maneuverability, the Wichita is a better candidate all around than the Baltimore, and it is hands down one of the most maneuverable cruisers you're going to find at Tier 7. This isn't exactly because of your speed, which is fairly average, at 34.5 knots, but the Wichita is 1 knot faster than you'll find on the Baltimore. Its agility has more to do with its 680 meter turning circle, which is very tight for a cruiser, and 6-second rudder shift. The combination of these 2 stats make the Wichita exceptionally maneuverable, particularly if you want to buy into having even more maneuverability with a quicker rudder shift. It does take a little getting used to because first, you're probably going to find yourself oversteering in this because of just how responsive it is. But once you have it down, it is really hands down one of the best torpedo dodging cruisers in the game. The Wichita's concealment is not best in class, but she's certainly less visible than average. At 10.8 kilometers, that is 100 meters better than the Baltimore in base sea detectability and while firing in smoke. The other values here, detectability from air and range of guaranteed acquisition, are exactly the same on both ships. When we come to consumables, you have the same stuff going on here as you'd expect on the Baltimore. Your sonar has the same applicable ranges, the same number of charges, and can be safely described as your average Tier 7 sonar. Your heal is also going to restore a similar percentage of your life for a similar amount of time. The heal is a little less powerful, again, that's because you just have less hit points than the Baltimore. And then, of course, you have a choice that the Baltimore doesn't have. I would be remiss if, in reviewing this ship, I didn't tell you about it, but in my opinion, you're probably better off not realizing that this is even here, at least most of the time. But you can swap out radar for a catapult fighter. If you do, you'll get a pretty standard fighter. Probably more useful of the two options, though, is surveillance radar, which is the same 9-kilometer radar that you'd find on the Baltimore. It lasts 30 seconds and has the same recharge time. This is for sure a neat trick on the Baltimore that will generally discourage destroyers from getting too close to you, but it's arguably even better on the Wichita because of your faster rate of fire. So I would suggest not switching this over, particularly if you're going to try to play this ship at all like I do. Alright, so let's get into some gameplay. We're going to be on Crash Zone. Crash Zone's a map I don't think that I've featured a replay on. Probably because when I start on the seaside, I tend to potato pretty hard. I don't think anybody's really completely figured out how to play this particular map. In any case, I don't have a lot of wisdom to share with you there. But since I'm starting on sea, I'm going to start to move out to the outside because I want the use of that island there that's on the south side of sea to hopefully shield me from being deleted. As you can see, there's only one destroyer on the enemy team, which is kind of too bad because I brought a lot of firepower to deal with him. As you can see, I'm going to go ahead and put my commander up on the screen, and it is Thomas Kincaid. You can see I have 4 hydros. Probably not going to get to use all 4 of those in any match, let alone this particular one. And that's probably not a spoiler alert, just because the reload timer is long enough that it's just not likely that you're going to do it. But his abilities do let you reduce the amount of that reload timer, so I guess it's possible. In any case, you're more likely to have it ready if you're using Kincaid than if you're not. And as you can see, we've got just the one battleship with us. Our destroyer has moved into sea to start to capture that. I take a quick look at who's in the game. I'm mostly concerned with those 16-inch guns. Of course, the first thing that stands out is we've got a couple of Iowas on the enemy team, and I don't want to have too much to do with them if I can possibly help it. At least not while they're paying attention to me. That Belfast has popped its smoke, and since I have 3 radars, I figure why not give him a little bit of a surprise since he was just planning on shooting my teammates to bits. He immediately starts to back up, which is, of course, the right thing to do. And there you can get the first taste of kind of the decent accuracy you end up with the Wichita, even if you don't put any abilities into it. Might have been a good idea there at the end to have switched over to AP. Also adjust the aim of my last shot there because I definitely land several shots into the side of that island. As we can see, we have located one of the Iowas. I do open fire on it because, as you can see, I am floating behind this island, so he shouldn't be able to shoot at me at this point. That Amagi, on the other hand, is also a problem because he can also punch through my armor at any particular angle. But now we've got the full effect of the island, and we're able to just kind of lob some shots over there. Now at this point, I do really want to help that Bismarck in front of me. Unfortunately, I really also don't want to round that corner, so I'm trying to situate myself in such a way that I can maybe get some shots on the Iowa without necessarily giving up my cruiser for return fire. Since this doesn't seem to be working out too well, I am starting to think about the other side of it. We can also see we've got some extra company that's floating back towards sea. Now at this point you can see if I really wanted to disengage I could. My sea detectability is low enough that I could just make a run for it. That might be a little unsportsmanlike on my part. And we start some long-range gunnery on that Kutuzov. Here you can see Kutuzov is one of those targets where I can do a decent amount of damage if I can hit the darn thing. At these ranges, obviously your high shell arc makes it a little more tricky because they have a little bit more time to dodge. Now it looks like the Kutuzov is smoking up so that I stop shooting at him. I do begin to move away at this point, and that's because you can see we've lost B to a destroyer. I guess you can't see that we lost B to a destroyer, but you can kind of work it out. Nobody spotted the guy, and he managed to take the cap uncontested. I do put a couple of shots out here on the Iowa, kind of risky. What I'm trying to do is start a fire, hope that he burns his damage repair kit, and you can see my destroyer still in the area trying very much to line up some torpedoes, I bet. Now we do have a fire on the Iowa. We're going to follow our last couple of shells in there. This is with the shell follow view on preset 1 and 2. That Iowa is wise to the fact that one fire is not going to kill him, and it would be a lot better to just take all of the damage that that fire is going to give him than to flood out, essentially, if he gets hit by torpedoes. As I'm moving back, you can see we've got a Hipper. A Hipper is actually a ship that I've had pretty good luck with the AP. He does have to give you broadside in order for this to actually work. And though we don't come up with anything big there, you can see a pretty respectable damage total. There, another 6,000 damage. And now with just the front two turrets, we're trying not to give ourselves up too much. It looks like he's shooting HE, so I go ahead and start to turn out. He's finished off by one of my teammates, which is also completely fine. It's still not going to be shooting at me no matter who killed him. Ooh, we shoot down an aircraft. That's exciting. And now, what I want to do is I need to get in a situation where I am between where I expect the destroyer to be and where my remaining battleships are, because of course I don't want my battleships to end up getting hit a whole bunch of times with torpedoes. That would be bad news for my team. The Richelieu is a ship that I can bounce, and you can see I'm presenting a pretty excellent angle to him at most times. He can go in the flat stern if he was really lucky, but it is hard to hit that. And we continue to land shells all over the front of that ship. You can see his salvo, he does hit me a couple times. He doesn't really walk away with too much, and this is a trade that I'm happy to do because obviously that fire is doing significantly more damage, and even there you're landing 3,700 damage. That's pretty good. Now that looks like a problem. So he didn't quite get into position in time, probably a little bit too distracted by doing damage to that particular ship. And unfortunately that means that our battleship gets knocked out. But you did see the direction that those torpedoes were coming from, so my guess is this guy is starting to push around the edge of the border. That's why you see me heading basically out to the edge of the border. I'm trying to limit his ability to actually get into a position where he can launch more torpedoes. I'm outside of the Richelieu's range, so this spot is from the enemy destroyer. I go ahead and pop my radar. Unfortunately, with my sea detectability, I think it's right around 9.8 or 9.9 with this build. That means that I don't have all the range that I need in order to reach to the edge of the map. This is one reason why that Dewey build that I suggested in the commanders section actually is considerably more useful in certain circumstances than even Kincaid. In any case, that Yudachi smokes up. We land a couple extra shells on him, land our Confederate. We're up to 112,000 damage. Now it is going to take me just a little bit of time to get out there, and I'm going to start to angle, assuming that this guy's going to turn out rather than try to make an extra brave dodge in towards me. I'm paying attention to whether or not I get spotted at this point, because that's going to tell me if he has left the smoke screen. As you can see, we're not spotted yet, so we're getting pretty close to being able to actually catch him on hydro. And I start to slow down here so that I've got about the right range to the edge of the map, or Jean Barriere as they say. And then we activate our hydro. We catch the Yudachi, probably a little bit off guard. And at 4.1, he's just inside of my sonar range, which is 4.4. Now we do manage to finish him off. Unfortunately, this has kind of taken us out of the actual battle for a bit. And in the meantime, we've started to develop something of a loss on our team. We lost our destroyer, and we're down a ship. Time is ticking away. We've still got that Richelieu, and now we're in a situation where the enemy owns all three bases. This is not a winning strategy, letting the enemy get all of your bases, but sometimes it happens. You can see I'm putting HE out there on the Richelieu again. I could wait and count down his damage control if I had any idea how long it lasted. My guess is probably around 8 or 9 seconds. I load into AP, just hoping I have enough time to actually launch another set of shots out at the Richelieu. Unfortunately, he decides to load the torpedo, and he takes out our battleship, so that is kind of another kick in the pants. In terms of a trade, I mean, it makes sense why you would do that. We have an Iowa. He is just about as broadside as he can possibly be. So I'm going to test right now what our AP situation looks like with a couple of shots. You can see, 5,000 damage there. I'm not going to walk away with any big hits. There, we're just at, almost 4,000. And he's developing a better angle, so I am going to go ahead and switch over to HE. Now we got 2 fires on him. We're going to start aiming bow so that we can maybe get a third. Unfortunately, bow is a little bit harder to hit. And though I may be in a situation where I look like I'm trying to bow tank, the truth of the matter is... Oh, that shot was ugly. The truth of the matter is, I really just want to make myself as small a target as physically possible, because the Iowa doesn't care about my armor. This is kind of an all-or-nothing strategy, because if he does hit me through the front of the ship, he's probably going to citadel me, or at least do full AP damage. Ugh, that looks painful. Okay. Yeah, it could have been worse. Could have been worse. As you can see, we are being shot from the side, which is no good. And I'm moving back in towards this island, hopefully to get a little bit more cover. Also, maybe that rock will help me a little bit. I'm not sure. I think he's going to be able to still lob shells over that rock, but it never hurt. Okay, so that is exactly what happens when you get shot by an Iowa. But as you can see, we've left ourselves with only 10 seconds left. We do manage to burn the Iowa down, but we are going to sail on to a loss here. Ultimately, this game is probably a little bit more high performance than I like to include in my reviews, but I thought it showed a good mix of what the Wichita is really good at. You have a nice gun platform with fast-firing guns, decent HE chance, and, of course, you have all of these consumables at your use, so an excellent close to medium range cruiser that you can really get in there and try to mess up the destroyers that are trying to mess up your team. In games with 2 or 3 destroyers, you tend to be a little bit more excited. In this case, we did manage to show off how we can get multiple radar uses. So win or lose, I think this is a pretty decent showcase of what the Wichita is capable of. I hope you have enjoyed this review. It's a fun little ship that I intend to earn during this campaign, and I wish you all luck if you want to do that as well. In any case, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.